Well, welcome to the Tenant Podcast. I'm Todd Pearson here with my friend and partner in crime, Wes Brown.
Hey, Todd. Wow, what a busy week. I've just been insane. But it's good to see you, and I'm excited to be here.
It's good to see you too. And how does insanity differ from any other time in your life?
Probably not much different with me. I'm a little crazy anyway, so.
Actually, I think you're tame in your old age, Bandit.
Probably.
That's Wes's nickname, by the way, Bandit. So
Bandit.
There you go. Someday
Bandit
we'll tell the sordid story.
Not tonight, though.
Not tonight. Oh, it's a new week and a new episode. But before we talk about art, I want to acknowledge the good folks over at New Magazine. That's N-U-E. New Magazine is our media sponsor, and they just put out the winter issue of New Denver. You can find the link to the issue on the Tenant Facebook page, along with the link to their new 2021 arts issue. Or if you are on Instagram, you can follow the new national edition at NUE_magazine and the Denver edition at NUE_Denver_magazine. And also, New Denver is putting on a weekend of the arts April 24th and 25th. So mark your calendars. I don't have all the details yet, but as soon as I get them, I will share them with you. I think it involves galleries, art, artists, restaurants, music, I think. But like I said, I haven't got all the details yet. So as soon as I get them, I will share them with you listeners here in Denver. Our guest this week is Michael Burnett. Michael is curator and owner of Space Gallery located at 400 Santa Fe Drive here in Denver, Colorado. And if you want to check out the stunning gallery, the art and the artists that he represents, go to the Space Gallery website at spacegallery.org. Michael, how are you?
I'm great. Good to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for your willingness to come on, because I know you've had a kind of a crazy week yourself. So I appreciate your willingness to spend a bit of time on a Friday evening to talk with us.
Yeah, that's a good distraction from my children.
Sometimes we need that, and I can relate. You're a gallery owner. You're not originally from Colorado, though.
No, originally from Edinburgh, Scotland, which is where I studied and grew up and spent half of my life. Moved here in 2001.
How does someone from Scotland end up in Denver, Colorado?
It's a great question. So I originally came out here a couple of years before that to join a friend of mine who had gone to art school with, who was doing a kind of a gap year up in Vail, and she was working the ski season up there. And I spent a couple of weeks with her skiing every day, and just realized that was probably what I should be doing too. And so the very next year, I kind of applied to do a very similar thing with the same company, and somehow they took me. And then I spent a year in Breckenridge, and that was probably 1999. God, sounds crazy saying 19. We're so old. We're so old. Oh my God.
We are. When you say 1999, I think of Prince. So
yeah, that brings back a lot of great memories.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's how I came to Colorado the first time, and then I think after that season, I did a bunch of traveling. Me and my friend bought an old Volkswagen Rabbit and drove from Colorado all the way through Death Valley and down Highway 1 into Mexico, and drove all the way to Mexico City from Tijuana, which don't do that. That's a long drive. That took us about 6 days driving 12 hours straight. Picked up my parents there and had a little vacation with them. And anyway, at the end of about 3 months of traveling, I met someone in Honduras, and she is now my wife. And she's from Colorado, so she brought me back here.
Wow, it's a great story. Were you done with your studies in Scotland? Because you're an artist yourself and you went to art school, correct?
Yeah. So I went to the Edinburgh College of Art and got a degree in painting and drawing. And that, really doesn't prepare you for much. But it was a great experience. And my contemporaries were really just an awesome group of people. There was probably 20 of us that were really super motivated and, thought we were probably going to change the world, but really pushed each other. And it was just a really strong, embracing environment. And it was just a great experience. And after getting my degree, I hung out for a couple more years in Edinburgh, painting and trying to make kind of a meager living selling my work, which was fun.
Were you creative as a kid? Is that why you ended up eventually pursuing what you did?
Yeah, I think so. As far back as I can remember, which isn't, my memory is pretty foggy, but I remember distinctly kind of looking at Disney characters and copying Disney characters endlessly. My parents bought me this little pop-up desk so you could kind of adjust the angle of it. My dad's an architect, so he was probably like, I think my son should do just what I do. So he got me one of those desks that kind of pop up. And I used to draw pretty much every night, just kind of doodling and creating these sketches. And I got pretty good at that. And I think, when it came to high school, that wasn't really my, academics, or not really my forte, but the art teacher, I think, really took kind of notice. And I think he was the one that was like, you should really think about art school. And then I think my dad definitely jumped on board with that idea. And I really didn't have any other skills, so it wasn't much of a choice. That was pretty much, the only way I was going to go.
What is it like growing up in Scotland? I'm just curious because you're the second person I've ever met from Scotland. And the other gentleman that I met was also from Edinburgh.
It's a beautiful, beautiful country. And Edinburgh is just so incredibly well put together from all those years ago. It's very charming. I just remember, my whole life was kind of surrounded by sport when I was younger. And I was always on my bike, either going to soccer or coming back from soccer. I had a little BMX and I just used to take that everywhere. And then when I was in high school, I played every single sport under the sun and I loved all of it. I couldn't really think of anything else but when I was going to play the next, great sporting game. So that kind of dominated my childhood, just going from, one sport to the next: golf, rugby, soccer, badminton. I actually did a year. My third year in art college was in Salamanca. So I did a gap year, I guess you guys call it here, and spent 6 months traveling around Spain with the university badminton team, playing in all sorts of great cities and traveling with them. Who knew? Like, a guy from Scotland would end up playing badminton all over Spain. But it was a great part of my education, just kind of that whole experience. I did not spend much time at the Escuela de Bellas Artes, unfortunately. I had too much fun just kind of exploring. But it was always something, I think, that, I really enjoyed growing up and always loved sketching. So I think just coming back to that seemed to make sense. I think, the rain is so dominant there in Edinburgh that, every day it's hard to get motivated. Like here, you wake up, every day is sunny, and you jump out of bed and you can do pretty much anything that day. But there, it's just so oppressive. And all you want to do is go to the pub and drink. So it's hard to stay motivated. And I think coming over here was just this giant light bulb of, you don't have to live under this cloud. You can do anything you want today. And that for me was like really just such a crazy motivation to wake up and be like ready to go on all cylinders. So that was it was a huge change to my lifestyle. And I still love just the Colorado sunshine is amazing.
It is amazing. We're pretty fortunate to live in this state, I think. And
Yeah.
And now there's been tons of people that figured out that it's not just cold and dreary during the winter. We actually have a ton of sunshine, and it's a beautiful place to live. So
Even those foreigners are coming over.
yeah, foreigners, God.
We love foreigners.
It's so funny, man. When I first met you, I had no idea you were from Scotland. Like I can hear it come out now. And I watched the interview on the internet that you did, I think last summer, and I could hear a little bit of the accent in there. But when I first met you, I had zero clue. So you've done well to get rid of the accent, whether it was conscious or not.
You know what it was? It was just so hard explaining myself every 20 minutes to the next person with the accent. And I think part of it was just trying, to morph into, not having to explain myself every 5 minutes. And it was much easier to kind of be incognito. And then the Colorado accent is pretty soft too. So I think we got that going for us. I don't think a Scotsman could probably pull off a Texan accent. There'd be too much of a rub. But Colorado's soft, and so is Edinburgh. So I think both of them combined, it's not too different.
So you met your wife, you came back to Colorado. She's from Colorado. You marry her. Were you initially just shopping your art around, selling your art?
So my wife was the one who was like, what are you going to do here? She taught 5th grade down at the Wyatt Edison Charter School. She had some amazing kids. Ended up doing a really fun mural in that school down there with her kids, which was a total riot for a whole week. But yeah, I think I sold Cracker Jacks and peanuts for one day at Coors Field and realized that probably sustaining a job was not going to be that easy for me out here. And I think my wife kind of was like, well, why not open a place, to showcase your own artwork, because it's still been so fresh, in my memory from, that's what I was doing in Edinburgh. So that's what we decided to do. We found an old storefront down on 20th and Larimer, and Sam Fishman, the landlord, just had this complete wreck of a building. And we told him that all we needed was some hardwood floors and some white walls and some track lighting. And he was delighted because the tenant build out was, relatively inexpensive. And so he threw those things in for us and kind of painted the front. And we opened our first gallery almost exactly 20 years ago in April 2001. And that was a great space. So for a long time, well, maybe 6 months, it was just me showing my own work and making it in the space. So it was a studio in the back where I could get messy with concrete floors. And then up front, it was just, kind of a very beautiful old Victorian kind of storefront with this very simple interior. And I exhibit my work there for 6 months, and we were just sort of breaking even and doing okay. And then people kept coming in during that time, curious about the space and wondering whether or not they could show their work there. And so it just kind of grew from that. Eventually we took on, a few artists that we really liked the work of. Monica Aiello was one of them, who her and her husband are kind of have been around Denver art scene for forever. And so it was a real honor to be able to show her work. And it just kind of grew from there. And now I think after maybe a year, we had 5 to 10 artists that we were showcasing. And we just started kind of putting together some programming and some curating. And those first years were pretty funny. I mean, we had really little to no idea what we were doing, like probably most people when they start a business. So our first concept when we had artists was, I think we rented wall space to them. A wall in the gallery was like $300. And then we would take like a 35% commission. So the commission was smaller, which was kind of attractive for artists who had not shown before. but then we were still able to make some money off of renting the wall space. And then in the back where I have my studio, there was kind of it's almost like on the other side of the wall, there was two other studios that we kind of carved out. So we rented those out to make ends meet. And we parked cars during the ball games for $20 a car. And that really, during those lean times, man, that was like gold. And of course, during the summer, they have a ball game every 5 minutes. And those people would then walk through from the parking lot through the gallery. And, occasionally, I mean, not all sports fans are into art, but occasionally we'd have some people that were kind of interested. So it helped, just let us get a foothold, I suppose.
Yeah, that's a great way to supplement your income. My gosh.
Yeah.
Great opportunity.
Yeah, it was good. And then we also did life drawing classes. So I taught life drawing. I remember you could buy a 10-pack of life drawing classes for $100. We had a great little community. My wife got pregnant, I think, before we opened the gallery. So almost immediately we were kind of going through that whole thing too. And so she was our figure drawing model occasionally, clothed. But she would come through a model for us. We had these giant bean bags, and we kind of set up these different kind of scenarios and kind of cover the front windows. But it was really fun. Yeah, I remember all those students from back then. And it's funny because I was probably only like 26 or something. Most of my students were older than me, but it was really fun. Good group of people. It just kind of felt like, we were starting to build, a small community, which was fun too.
Was there many people in that area, many artists working in that area at that time when you guys first started?
Yeah. So at that time we had Core New Art Space, which is now, I think, on 9th and Santa Fe. Sorry, they moved back over. They're up by, they're in West.
Yeah, the 40 West.
Yeah. I think for a time they were over here, but they were across the street. And so we had all those people too that would come over and kind of frequent the gallery. And I think we try to coordinate, with our openings so that we could share in more exposure. And then around the corner from us was Highland Mather had this incredible building and gallery called Andenken, which I think means thinking in German. And he and his wife at the time had large studios downstairs, and they're building in a huge gallery upstairs. And I think some of the downstairs studios were kind of live work as well. I don't think the rules were too concrete back then, so people were doing pretty much whatever. So it was a really fun place to walk through because there was always something crazy going on. They had metal workers and fine artists of all types and all sorts of weird shenanigans and parties, and it was a good time. So we had that go on too, and I think between those three, there was just enough of a presence that people felt like there was a motivation to come down here.
And that was before everything got really crazy with the Denver real estate market too. You could still find space that was somewhat reasonable, at least.
Yeah. I think our rent back then was like $1,500, which seemed like a ton at the time. And I think we were there 2.5 years. And during that time, we took on artists like Lu Kong, who's an incredible figure painter. He does these kind of very lifelike, photorealistic portraits now. And we gave him kind of his first show. I remember I think he'd entered a juried show at Core, and I just thought his work was incredible. So we asked him if he'd like to show, and yeah, so once we started having artists like that who were kind of selling work, my wife, after a couple of years, decided, because we'd had our first son, Finley, that it was probably better for her to kind of stay home and be mom, and me to really focus on the gallery to try and make it profitable. So we kind of made a transition at that point to her just staying at home. And then she got pregnant again. And then we moved in 2013 or 2003. We moved over to the Santa Fe Arts District. There was a lady by the name of Jeannie King who opened a gallery called Fresh Art, which is now, she owned that building that is now Dart Gallery, and in the front there's a co-op gallery. She had a gallery in there called Fresh Art, and it was really, kind of a happening little gallery. She did an amazing job marketing and promoting, and we opened the same night in the Santa Fe Arts District, before it was really even the Santa Fe Arts District. And then once there was me and Jeannie, Sandy Carson had been there forever. She kind of pioneered. And then Macy Dorff, artist on Santa Fe, had been there forever too. And Chalk was across the street from them. I moved in right across the street from Sandy. And so then there was 5 or 6 galleries down there, and we moved to kind of form the art district on Santa Fe way back then. So that was fun too. I mean, we were in a much bigger space. We had all sorts of studios in the back. We had some metal workers in the back. It was more kind of like that Andinken, gallery where there was just a lot going on all at once. A lot of great energy, a lot of kind of like-minded people sharing ideas. And that was, 2003. And we were there for 10 years in that space, which seems totally crazy again. And we had a couple more kids and more kids.
Was the original gallery down in the Ballpark neighborhood, was that originally called Space?
Yeah, it's always been Space. And, at one point it was sort of an acronym for all the things that we did inside. So it was studios, private events, arts, culture, education. And so that's where kind of Space, plus it was just a space for everything and anything. I mean, when we started out, like I say, it was studios, a place that you could do life drawing. We hosted events there, just basically anything to, try and stay afloat. So Space kind of just felt like it fit the bill.
When you transitioned to the gallery on Santa Fe in the heart of the art district there, were you still painting? Or were you more focused on the gallery side of things?
Yeah, I was still painting. I think I probably stopped painting about 8 years ago. And probably part of it was the stress of going through this whole process to where we are now. We've been here 6 years, but 2 years before that, possibly even 3, we had bought the land down here. We were paying a lease on the land without even having a bank to finance the potential for building the building. So, and I was trying to run Space down the street at the same time as paying the lease. So I just think it just got too much. It just got too much to try and paint as well. And, you have to be in the right state of mind to paint, I think. And I think I got to the point where I was just feeling too overwhelmed. So at that point, I think, my entire focus was, trying to get financing for what we've built here at 400 Santa Fe Drive. It took me 6 banks and I think a whole year and a half to try and find backing for the funding to build this. And it was crazy, crazy amount of stress to where we just didn't know. And we were pretty green, and I think instead of asking lots of people lots of questions and getting a good sense of things, I think my kind of bullish, youthful enthusiasm was just to try and, beat down the doors and find anyone that could lend us some money. So again, I mean, the theme through all of our business, I think, is just having the will to succeed, and having the drive to try and make something happen. because like I said, I mean, going through art school and getting a degree in painting and drawing really doesn't prepare you for any of that. And so a lot of it was just kind of learned on the fly. Even selling art is kind of a skill that, you know, I think it's hard for some to teach someone. I think you have to want it, you know, enough, just like sales. You have to kind of want it enough to make a success of it. And so there's an art to all those things. And it's taken me a long time to learn those things, but I wouldn't have it any other way. It's been a really fun journey, but you know, I think kind of learning along the way has been my path.
That space that you had down on 7th and Santa Fe, that was a beautiful space, but this new space that you have is just absolutely phenomenal. And I feel embarrassed that I didn't realize that you guys had moved and that it was just about I guess it was almost a month ago, first Friday at the beginning of this month, when I happened to walk by the gallery. I had been talking with a friend that wanted to go see this show that you currently have at Space. And I was like, oh, there's Space Gallery right there. I'm like, I have to go in here. I need to check it out. I was like blown away.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely a dream come true. Like walking through this space, I still pinch myself, you know. But it was a really tough go. I mean, we had gotten financing from the contractor. I mean, the bank, and then our contractor just was not holding up his end of the bargain. We ended up having to fire him and finish the building ourselves. So that whole period was just like, I mean, I lost a couple of years of my life, I feel like, and definitely learned a lot, but it could have gone a lot smoother.
So did you learn basically by hard knocks, or did you have like a mentor that kind of helped you, guide you, or some advisors?
No, I mean, definitely just the school of hard knocks. I mean, you know, when I first moved to Colorado, before I opened the gallery, I did some trim work. Actually, I think it was when we opened the gallery, kind of at the same time. We had a good friend of mine open a store right next door to the gallery called DC Works, and he did custom fabrication, just beautiful steel and woodwork. But to make ends meet, he ran like a trim crew. So all these new production homes that were popping up at that time, we would go out and I would trim a whole house, do all the doors, all the molding, hang the doors, and put kitchen in about 2 days, just three of us, just running through these production homes, knocking them out. And it was good money, and it was fast and quick, and we were young and could take it. In doing all that, I think I learned a lot about construction and just how things are built and how things go together. It was interesting just to kind of work on these projects and see, you know, from start to finish, these houses go up and see everything that it took. So I think by the time, and I did a ton of work on the building at 765 Santa Fe, you know, we end up doing a lot of sheetrock and adding bathrooms and adding electrical and adding things along the way just to make them better as the business kind of improved. And I think I wanted, you know, the look and feel to be a little more polished. We just kind of transitioned and did all the work as we went. And, you know, by the time we got over here, I think, you know, I'd been through a fair amount of preparation for all that stuff. And so it didn't feel too far away. I also kind of remodeled the homes that we were in at the same time, just as we moved, you know, as our family grew, we had to kind of move houses and we fix them up as we go, and just so that we could keep things moving. So it felt like a natural extension. And I love a project. It's been something that I just love a mission and getting locked in and trying to grind out, you know, until it's done. And so I think this was like the mother of all those projects all rolled into one. And, you know, it's still a project. Like there's a ton of maintenance on this building, and still have to kind of get in here we had one of, during the deep freeze a couple of weeks ago, we had one of our pipes burst. And so cutting back drywall and fixing all that. And so, in some senses, I think it's been good because, I've saved a lot of money that way, and being able to just get to a point where now, I'm really able to benefit from it. And I don't think if I'd had that same grind that a lot of this would have happened. I think a lot of people will give up along the way because it just gets too hard. But I'm pretty, strong-headed, I guess.
A lot of tenacity.
There you go. Something like that.
Yeah.
Stupidity.
Sometimes I think that's the best, though. When you don't really know what you're getting into, you go into it totally naive to the situation, and then you just figure it out.
Well, yeah, the learning factor is like to the power of 10, because everything is new, and you have to kind of solve so many problems as you're going. And I really enjoy that. I really enjoy rolling up my sleeves and getting to the other side. So for me, it hasn't felt like, as much work as maybe it does for other people, because part of me kind of likes that part of it. And I think a lot of it is about the end result and finding, that you can create really beautiful things out of something that kind of a crappier hand that you've been dealt. You can turn it into something really polished if you're willing to put the work in.
This all sounds like it definitely was very organic, the way everything happened. Once you got into that space on Santa Fe, on 7th and Santa Fe, did you have kind of a vision of what you wanted to make space into at that point?
So the way that whole thing worked was when we moved in, we had the very front space of that building, which is about 1,500 square feet, maybe 2,000 square feet, totally manageable gallery. And we were in there for maybe a year, renting from a guy called Patrick Ryan. Hey, Patrick. He had an amazing design fabrication company called Goog, and he would build all these incredible things. He did the Vesta Dip and Grill and all sorts of restaurants and kind of steel and wood. I mean, a lot like my friend's business, DC Works, but kind of on a bigger scale. So he had put in a really nice steel shop in the back and a wood shop upstairs in the back. So he was in there, and I think at that time he was starting to have kids. And I think he was starting to feel like it was a lot, to try and manage. I think he had 10 staff, and it just seemed like he kind of lost the passion for it. It was just too much. And so he was kind of making an exit of the master lease. And so after a year of being there, the landlord who owns the building turned around and said, look, either you're going to rent the whole space or you're going to have to move out. And to me, that was like, oh my God, we just got here. Could we not have, 10 seconds of breathing room first? And at that point, our rent went from $1,000 to $7,000 or something crazy. And we decided to take on the whole building. And that's when we started renting studios out. We found a really good tenant who'd been a friend of mine, Morgan Brisky, who's this incredible metal worker. He took over the metal shop in the back. We put up walls and created studios upstairs where Pat's old wood shop was, and finished the back gallery space. Oddly enough, Highland Mather, who had and Dinkin at one point had been in there in that same front space running it as a gallery. So there was some interesting crossover there. But we just started to hustle and make it work. We got all sorts of tenants kind of signed up and in there, all sorts of great artists. And then because we had a much bigger space, we kind of focused more on private events too. And for a period there, it was a really hot little spot to get married. I think we were one of the few venues where people could do pretty much, they could bring their own caterer, they could provide their own entertainment. We weren't gouging them. It was a really fair price, and it just booked up like crazy. And so for a good stretch there, we were just going crazy with events and, curating shows and just trying to do all of those things all at once, renting out studios. And so the hats at that point were just like insane. But I really enjoyed the energy that it brought. And I really enjoyed, a lot of the people that were in the building. So it didn't feel too overwhelming because they all felt like, part of the community, friends who we had each other's backs. And I think that was a fun little stretch. And then the rent just got kind of bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And eventually I felt like I could leverage all of that 10-year history of paying rent, and, take it to a bank and say, look, this is our track record. We've paid our rent every month on time for 10 years. And this rent that I'm paying currently is probably going to be more than a mortgage would be if you lend me this much money to build the building that I want to do. And so that's how we managed to convince the bank. Because, we still didn't really have much income, we had income, but not for the sort of money that we wanted to borrow. And so that was our kind of bargaining chip that we managed to kind of use in the end to get a loan.
And you said you had to go to a number of banks. So was it hard to find a bank to support you, or did you have to use multiple banks to make the project work?
Yeah. I think in the beginning, I think because I was, coming in a little sideways and probably a little hot, the ideas probably weren't completely galvanized. But I did everything in reverse. So I got an architect to draw up the plans. I had an engineer. I did all those things on the front end, which is crazy. Most people don't do that until they have the land and the loan secured. So I was able to come to the bank with these plans and say, look, this is a real, and my architect had created this really sexy rendering of the gallery. These are the plans. This is what we have in mind. This is what we're doing currently. This is how we're going to change, to make it better. All of these things are making our business better than it already is. And we're already paying, our rent. So a potential for making more money and paying your loan, is massive. So give me the money. And, I think a lot of people just thought that it was a little wingnut. So much of it is based off of what you have in your own bank account and what your assets are. And it's a really shitty kind of thing. I totally get it. I get the stance that the banks have to have, but at the same time, it excludes so many creatives and so many people in our field from being able to kind of finance their dream. And, I think it's just that perseverance. I was going to get this done. And part of it was like, I've already spent this money on this architect and the engineering drawings. I've told so many people about it. People were already thinking about getting married there. And I was talking about how their wedding could be in this fantasy space that wasn't even there yet. So the whole way, I was just convincing myself and convincing everyone around me that it was going to happen, to the point where it actually happened. I think there was a lot of belief that this was going to happen. And so it is still totally crazy to walk through here and think that we did it. I'm still in disbelief sometimes when I walk up here, but it's a beautiful feeling because it's all hard earned and well thought. And I think, but yeah, so that's how we managed to get the bank loan. A lot of convincing. And then since then, just because I love a project, we decided to get another space back in 2018. It was another total gut job, but we bought an old kind of warehouse, and we transformed it into kind of a new gallery space, and that's called Space Annex. And we opened that in May 2019. And right now we've got a show in there. We donated it to Artma, which is a nonprofit that raises money for kids with cancer, and they're doing a little exhibit in there at the moment, which is really fun.
That's so cool, man. So cool that you had this vision. And do you like being kind of a little bit of the underdog?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose, I think when you have a passion for something, it can make you kind of look beyond a lot of the hardships, because it was definitely some tough knocks. But I think I love and was surrounded. My parents did an amazing job in just surrounding me with art. When I was growing up, it was all over our house, and I can remember every single piece in the house. A great little collection, and it was nothing special, but it was special to me just because I grew up around it. And I think that's something that just became sort of inherent, and I think that I want to now pass on to people. Like, to live without art is really, you're missing out. And I think a lot of people don't see it that way, but when they start collecting and they start bringing pieces into their homes, it's transformative. And it really, that's what's so rewarding about my job, is connecting the artists with the collectors and building, these pieces into their lives that they were never thinking about, and it's transformed their everyday. And I think that's what keeps me rocking. And I think that's been a substitute in a way for me making my own work. The substitute of selling other people's is almost as rewarding as making my own, because I see that connection. I see the end result, and I see how it transforms people's lives, not only from the artist perspective of making the work, but people putting it in their homes and getting great joy out of it. So it's been a great thing.
I could totally see that. Getting excited, connecting people with other people, and selling the artist to the collector, the artist that you believe in, and seeing their career trajectory and being a part of that. I think that'd be really exciting.
It's been awesome. I mean, some of these artists we've shown for like 10, 15 years now, and they're really good friends, and that relationship is really strong too. And I think you're right, like seeing that journey and just watching these artists grow, and coming back from a residency all inspired by new travel experience and creating these things that are just, you can see that they're up in their own game. You've seen where they've come, like the last 5 years. And I think to watch that transformation is so rewarding.
So Space is now, it's a collective of different spaces, correct? You have the main huge gallery at 400 Santa Fe Drive. Then you have Space Annex, which is up on Cherokee, right? Like 95 Cherokee, something like that.
Yeah, exactly.
And then you have another space in Rhino, the Space Satellite.
Satellite Space. That one kind of fell onto our laps. Huge thanks to Jody Ruff Cooper, one of our artists, for connecting us with the developer down at that space. These developers wanted to put in a gallery, partly as a lure for their leasing office, which is kind of a smart move. But they were looking for a gallery, and Jody got a big commission through them to do this really cool wireframe Rhino that sits down between 33rd and 34th on Larimer, right outside the gallery down there. And he introduced us, and they came through here, and they were like, yeah, this looks like it would be a good fit for what we have in mind. And they built out the walls kind of like we have them here, where they just float. And we got to kind of decide where the track lighting was going to go and how the floor layout was going to go to benefit, the gallery. So they worked with us from the early stages to make sure that it was going to be a good fit. The beautiful part is that they have just given us the space, which is kind of in today's world pretty amazing. I mean, we don't have to pay any kind of rental for it. Well, $1 a month is what we pay. So to have a space in Rhino, down there is pretty amazing, and especially for that cost. I think part of the thing that's been a little tough down there is just with the virus, and everything kind of being closed, especially being right next to their leasing office. They haven't been able to really keep their doors open because of the restrictions. So it's all by appointment. So it's not like a lot of people are really going through that space at the moment. But we do have a beautiful show by Patricia Aaron that's in there right now. And she's showcasing some of her beautiful encaustic paintings. And that'll be up, I think, probably through the first week of February. So if you're down there, it's between 33rd and 34th on Larimer on the right-hand side. Beautiful little spot. So yeah, we got lucky on that one, and we're just excited for when restrictions have lifted and Rhino kind of gets back to where it was, where all the pedestrians kind of coming out to enjoy, all the restaurants and amazing murals that are down in that neighborhood, which I would anticipate summer's going to be pretty hopping down there.
I think you're right. I want to talk about the big gallery at 400 Santa Fe. That was a prefab building, and then you had your architect kind of redesign it around that to make it look as cool as it is. I mean, it's a very modern looking building. There's nothing else like it on Santa Fe.
Yeah, so I think in the design process, we wanted something that had this amazing span, kind of volume in the space that we could achieve pretty easily. And really, the pre-engineered steel buildings are the way to go as far as that goes. I mean, we've got, I think the inside walls are 44 feet across. And, to try and do that with like wooden trusses or anything else it'd be really hard. And so the pre-engineered steel building ticked a lot of those boxes in terms of like looking modern, clean. The roof is all made out of this 4-inch insulated panel. So it's very energy efficient. These buildings have walls that are 10 to 12 inches thick, and it's all packed in with insulation. So it's really very energy efficient for such a large building. And I just always loved the combination of steel and glass and concrete, those kind of three elements together. And the architect did a great job. I mean, we had to work with the city in creating what's called transparency with the storefront. So we had to bring the storefront glass in. That was not part of the original plan because we originally wanted more wall space. But in hindsight, I'm glad they did make us do that because, obviously it's great eye candy at night just to look in the space and see what's going on. And then the architect brought in those huge kind of ceiling clouds that hide a lot of the kind of internal structure of the space. So it just kind of takes out a lot of the noise that, the visual noise that might detract from the artwork.
All the mechanical stuff.
Yeah.
Have you always been drawn to kind of the modern aesthetic?
Yeah. I mean, I live in an old Victorian home from 1910.
Wow.
And we've got two other homes that are 1890s. I like the Victorian era too, but I think in terms of presenting art, there's nothing better than just kind of the building taking a backstage. So I think in terms of showcasing art, the modern aesthetic really works well. I mean, to the point where we we decided to kind of not even put baseboard in, but just kind of finish the edge against the concrete. We try and take out as many extraneous visuals as possible, like all the light switches are hidden, all the powers in the floor, so there's no outlets either on the floor or on the wall. I think just over time, I suppose that when I think about it, things have gotten cleaner and cleaner and cleaner, in terms of how we present the work. And I think most of it just comes down to really not being distracted when you're looking at the work. I think that's the best possible scenario.
And you said you had floating walls, right? So do they move?
Yeah. So those walls they hang off of a cable at the top. So it was just a really easy way of bringing walls in, but having them sort of not look too imposing. A lot of gallery walls have wheels on the bottom, which look cool, but I always found it kind of distracting. And so these floating walls have nothing. It's a piece of 2-inch steel tubing with 3/4-inch steel tubing welded on the inside and the sheetrock screwed on either side of it. So the whole thing just kind of becomes this clean wall sandwich. And so when we want to move them, we jack them up with a car jack and roll carts under either side, lower them back down, take the pins out the top. So they hang off of the trusses that are in the building, which are all the same height, dangling down. So we can hang them from any one of those trusses, which is really nice. And then we did this kind of the same thing at Satellite. We did the same thing because we have, in the annex space, we have the advantage of these giant steel beams that take up the whole span. So again, the floor space annex is totally wide open. And part of the beauty of floating, moving walls is that when we have a big events, we can move all the walls out of the way, keep the artwork on them, but then we open the whole space up for events. So part of it was just a practical solution for how do we present the work, but then when we want to kind of open it up, how do we move those out of the way?
Yeah. I love how clean it looks. I'm one of those people that would be wandering around and I would see a light receptacle and it would bother me. I would just be like, I hate seeing that light receptacle. So I love that you have it thought out to that degree, how to make it clean and how to make it work, as far as with these events and stuff that you hold there, which I think is a brilliant business model, not only, in your previous space where you had events, but renting out studios. That seems like a great way, a great business model for a gallery. It might not work for everybody, but
yeah. I mean, I think a lot of galleries will have some, extraneous means of, some do, framing as a way of kind of offsetting, a lot of their costs. Obviously that makes a lot of sense because it's part of their business model. When they're selling something, they can offer these framing services. But for us, part of it is just, I think, coming out of Europe, where it feels like there's just less waste, all the way around. People live in smaller places and they're used to, making the most of things. I think that's just part of my DNA. And so having this big open space that just sits empty half the time doesn't make any sense. So if you can fill it and people can really enjoy it for weddings, then it's a no-brainer. I mean, part of it is having to deal with the headache of moving sculpture and catering to kind of the moving landscape of an event. So it can be stressful in some regards, but definitely, the offset with extra revenue coming in is worth the headache, I think.
And you host any number of events, weddings, any kind of parties,
birthdays, anniversaries, bat mitzvahs. We do a lot of nonprofit events. We do proms. I mean, you name it, we've had it there. We do a big one with Thule, the rack company, every year. They're doing another one with us this year, I think. As long as the outdoor retailers, I think they just announced the dates for that. But we take down all the art. It's the only time that we ever do that for an event, but we actually completely gut the gallery of any artwork, and they bring in all of their cool product and kind of create this incredible showroom for a week. It's really only 2 days, but it takes them a couple of days to set up and a couple to break down. But the last time they brought in like 7 different vehicles, and they put all of their, boxes and racks and, on top of these cars. We had an old 1972 Volvo with the first Thule rack that was ever built. I think it was wooden, with metal rails. It was really cool. And they brought in a vintage Volvo because that was the period, the time. Talk about a beautiful car. There's something kind of rewarding about seeing those things come together. There's a real art bringing, a cool event like that in and working with a space and transforming it. So I can appreciate what they're doing. And so much of their design is clever and well thought out. So it seems like a fun synergy to watch it come together and be part of it. I mean, we definitely draw the line at some events. Back in the day when we were hustling, we probably did a few events that we shouldn't have, and we learned that raves probably don't go too well in galleries. And so,
you hosted a couple raves in your older space.
So the way that we did it again, it was just about making ends meet, but we rented out the basement of the space gallery. There was nothing down there. And so nothing could get damaged. It was just concrete floors, and the sound sounded amazing down there because, it's such an enclosed space and you couldn't hear it from the street because it was in a basement. So, we've tried it all at least once, and we don't do those anymore, although fond memories.
I want to kind of transition here, and I want you to talk about the artists that you represent and the kind of art that you show at Space.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I think our real focus is kind of become abstract work. And I think it's just a natural extension from, what I really enjoy making myself. So we focus on artists that use kind of new and innovative media and surface treatment in their work, things that are kind of tactile, people that are working with unusual ways of applying things. Not exclusively, but it seems like I'm definitely drawn to that kind of work that has this mystery of how it's made, how it comes together, paired with, just beautiful thing to look at. And also, people that are just kind of pushing the boundaries in terms of creation and what they're willing to do to create some beautiful work. And so I think that's become the focus is that kind of abstract work that has some real intrinsic beauty, but also a real mystery to it in terms of how it's made. Yeah.
And how many artists do you represent currently?
We probably have about 60 artists on our website, which is a lot, but some of those artists, have taken part in maybe one show, over 3 or 4 year period. Some of them show every year. So it really depends. I think the real kind of active body of our artists is probably 30, 35 artists that are really kind of, we're constantly showcasing. A lot of the other artists we've definitely shown in the past, but probably less frequently. So although it looks like a lot on our website, some of them are not as active. More recently, I've really started kind of looking kind of all over the country just for artists that I feel like I have a real kind of synergy with, or a real affinity with their work, and so over the last 3 or 4 years, we've probably added maybe 10 new artists from all over the country and Canada and Mexico as well, that I feel really strongly about their work and their practice. And that's been really fun, to bring someone in that you don't know, and hope that as much as I like their work, everyone else is going to like their work too. There's no guarantee in showcasing someone's work that the other people are going to like it. But I think that's become really fun. A fun part of my job is just kind of researching those people, finding out who I think, the Denver market doesn't have in terms of exciting visual work, and bringing that into our market so that, people can enjoy someone, that they've never seen from Philadelphia or from Brooklyn or from Chicago, that, might be big in their city, but have never shown in the Denver, Colorado area, and are totally new to the market. And so it kind of brings, I think, sort of excitement, and also fun for our artists to show with them. I mean, the way that we set up our programming is that we have 3 or 4 artists show at one time. They're 4 independent or 3 independent solo shows, but there's definitely a relationship between the work of the artists that we show together. So there's a loose underlying theme throughout each of our exhibits that ties them together.
So do you develop that theme, or is that?
Yeah. And often it's just, a good visual tie-in. Sometimes it doesn't have to be more than that, but I just feel like there's a good connection. I mean, in a very pared down way, our next show is called Blue. It focuses on 2 artists that use indigo in a gorgeous way. One of them is a fiber artist, Wendy Kouinia, who went out and studied under a master indigo dyer in the Midwest, and has kind of all sorts of exciting tales about, that process and dyeing her own material and then weaving it thereafter into these incredible forms. And then another artist, Madeline Dodge, who uses indigo as well. She paints on steel and does these beautiful kind of washes with indigo. In that case, you're looking at 2 or 3 artists that are using a similar process, but it's completely different artwork, and coming from very different angles. And so in that show, we're sort of highlighting one particular material, a medium, but completely different processes to come up with, intriguing artwork. So it's that's a really fun part of my job, curating those artists together and finding these relationships and pairings, and then, presenting the work in a really sort of enticing way. And I think is really as much of what I enjoy about the job as anything.
That's an artistic endeavor in itself, trying to put together work, I imagine. I think that'd be a really fun endeavor.
It's great. I mean, a lot of it just kind of sits in my head, but, I see so many visuals every day. And I think, in my own mind, I think they're sort of cataloging themselves together, almost subliminally, until, those connections are more concrete, and then they present themselves in an exhibit. So I think, I'm constantly cataloging these artists and making sense of their imagery, but it's all done, almost subconsciously, at a certain point, until it manifests itself. It's funny how those things can kind of unearth themselves, in the strangest times. You might not be thinking about it, but all of a sudden you kind of see that connection, and you knew why, those 2 people needed to be together.
It's so nice that you have this gallery space too, that it can accommodate multiple artists at one time.
The show that you currently have, you have 3 artists in there, and it's all phenomenal work. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, the current show that we have up, Tycho Chandler, who is a printmaker. She also is a fiber artist and has worked with Tyvek, printing on the Tyvek and cutting it up and creating these 3-dimensional forms with it, which are incredible. But the current exhibit just showcases her prints, mono prints that she made up at Omi Graphics up in Steamboat. And she's an artist that, again, we kind of saw her work, I think, at a juried show. And I just felt like there was something really unique and really promising about it. And that was maybe 6 years ago. And to watch her kind of transformation in terms of, I think part of it is just when people have an opportunity to showcase their work, maybe where they didn't before, I think they reach a new level, a new commitment to bringing that practice into more of a priority than it's ever been before. It's sort of the cart before the horse. You can work in a vacuum your whole life and not have anyone see your work, but I think some of these artists just need an opportunity to showcase their work, and when they do, it's amazing, the transformation of just having that. All of a sudden you see that their voice was, although you saw potential in it, it's like they got a megaphone when they're given the gallery as the backdrop, because they see an infinite amount of potential even in their own work. I mean, for some people it's very daunting, but others take it and really, I think it brings out the best in the artist, because they see that space and they're like, I really want to do my best work and I want to showcase the best representation of myself. And I think it pushes them forward into a new level.
Yeah, I was totally taken with her work. All 3 of those artists that you currently have on display right now in the gallery that you're exhibiting, they're phenomenal.
So yeah, I got off on a bit of a tangent there. So that was Tycho. And then Diane Sioni is a Steamboat artist from Steamboat, who is also a printmaker and a painter. And she started collaborating with her son more recently with his ceramics. And so she has, I think, probably 2 years worth of work in that exhibit. And it's kind of amazing to see the whole main exhibition space given over to one artist, because it's such a huge space, but she has more than enough work to fill it. And she's done an amazing job with the exhibit. And then upstairs we have Leopoldo Cuspinera, who's a Mexican-born artist who lives in Germany at the moment. His husband is over, he was in the military and stationed over in Germany. And so he's working over there, but he uses handmade papers and he cuts them up, slices them down and pieces them together in such a beautiful way. And he's sanding the paper. He's using these sort of archival glues to stitch patchwork these pieces together. And I think those are some of the most incredible things in the exhibit at the moment, because I talked about mystery, but you're totally dumbfounded on how he made these pieces. They're just gorgeous. I think that the theme that ties all those artists together is just kind of the subtlety and intricacy in his pieces, and how they kind of delve a little deeper into their practice. And you can kind of see the minutia. So you get kind of this macro, this overall view of the whole exhibit, but then you really zoom into their work and there's just so much going on. So I think it's a beautiful show. Definitely worth checking out. It's the last week, next week. So by the time this airs, it might be over.
Actually, there'll be a couple days left that you can see this show. So if you're in the Denver area, do yourself a favor, get down to Space Gallery and check it out, because it really is a phenomenal show. Every single one of these artists that Michael just mentioned, their work is stunning. And I will probably try to get back down there before it ends, because felt like I didn't get enough time that night to really spend the time that I wanted with the work. Is Space the largest gallery in Denver?
I really don't know.
It's got to be close if it isn't, as far as.
Never really thought of it in that term, but we have a nice outdoor sculpture garden, which sometimes people can overlook. But if you go through the door on the south wall of the gallery, it wraps around the backside. We've got a lot of outdoor sculpture out there that is really worth taking a look at.
You talked about seeking out artists as of late. Is that pretty much the way it goes from here on out? Like, you are the ones that are approaching the artists that you want to see in your gallery, or do you still entertain artists coming to you and showing the work?
I think always. I mean, I've understood from the other side of that, kind of trying to approach a gallery and and being rejected, and that's tough, but I think I'm always open to looking at people's work, and at least if it's not a good fit, suggesting another gallery that they might fit into, or giving them some constructive criticism that will hopefully help them push a little further into their work. Yeah, we get approached every week. We've got new artists from all over that are interested in at least starting a conversation and opening a dialogue. And I mean, it's tough because I feel like with the amount of artists out there needs to be 1,000 galleries in Denver for them to really be able to showcase all the work. And it's always something that I'm conscious of, and it's something that is tough in regards to what qualifies this artist to show in your gallery and not me, sort of thing, or why will you not show this person? And I think I'm just drawn to the work that I'm drawn to, plain and simple. That's really all it is. It's not for any sort of notoriety, or I think I'm always sort of driven by my gut, and if I love someone's work, then I'm going to want to try and showcase that work, no matter where it is or how hard it is to get. I mean, getting that work from Germany was a real chore, but it was so worth it because such an amazing technique and something that I think people really enjoy checking out. But it is tough to know that there's all these people that don't have that venue to show their work. Their work, is great, but they don't have that opportunity. And, opening a gallery is tough. And so, if we can't show it at the gallery, I mean, I remember when I first moved here, I showed at a couple of salons. I showed at a coffee shop before we opened the gallery. So, I don't shy away from those things. I thought that was some really good exposure for me. I sold some work. So I think there's something for everyone out there. Co-op galleries are awesome. I think Pirate has been around 30 years in Denver, which is maybe even I don't know, pretty long time. There's a new one down the street called Dark Gallery. So, my hope is that people can find their platform.
What advice would you give an artist that is looking to get into a gallery?
Well, I think we get a lot of people approach the gallery via email or online who have never physically been there, and I think it's hard for them to gauge, from afar, exactly who the director is, who the curator is, trying to understand their programming. I mean, you can see on our website what kind of work we show, and then we'll have someone approach us that does really beautiful landscape paintings. They're representational, but they're gorgeous, but that's not really our forte. And so I think understanding who you're reaching out to, and understanding what their program is, and understanding what their price point is, I think really kind of getting inside what they do as a business really helps the artist that's approach it in a much better way. I always appreciate people who have done their homework, understand who we are. And so it doesn't feel like either of us are wasting our time, equally for the artist. If it's not the right fit before you even go in there, then, it's probably not worth pursuing. So I think making sure that they understand what they're getting into for a start. And then I feel like if you're straight out of college, then probably you need to kind of work your way up into, a gallery environment by showing in other places first. I feel like every artist should try and, get some exhibitions under their belt, wherever that might be, so that they can understand the process of it before they try and approach something, that might be a little out of their reach. Even just, hosting or presenting my work in a hair salon, you have to frame it, you have to price it, you have to, we created cards for it, we had an opening. There's all that kind of understanding that goes along with it. But you can't really gain that understanding until you go through that process. And I think it's really good to get a few exhibitions under your belt like that, where you're learning kind of all those ropes, so that you can kind of get a better sense of what you're getting into.
That's great advice. What do you see as far as when artists approach galleries? What are some of the mistakes do you think that artists make besides not doing their homework?
Yeah, I mean, I think people will come in to a gallery, artists. Some mistakes might be coming in with a whole portfolio of work and expecting the director in there just to kind of drop everything and look at their work out of their busy schedule. So it's a mistake I made. I tried to walk into Rule Gallery when I first got here with a 5 foot by 8 foot painting at the back of a truck. And Robin Rule at the time kind of laughed at me, and she was gracious enough to look at the painting, but sort of, in so many words, escorted me out. So believe me, I've been there. I tried too, and I think understanding kind of where you're, what you're getting into is pretty important.
I imagine that's kind of a little bit of a irritation when people just expect you to drop what you're doing, and maybe you're in the midst of like getting ready for an event or changing a show out or what have you. Do you have any pet peeves as a curator, as a gallery owner?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good one. I mean, just people. I mean, I hate to speak badly of anyone that's trying their best to make it happen, but someone who's going through their phone trying to show me pictures of a painting that they just created, it just doesn't fit with the best way to approach. So that's a bit of a pet peeve. It's just like, first of all, it's impossible to see anything on a phone, represented properly. So that's one that kind of gets me. And then just people that maybe don't understand the stresses of the day. They can't see that you're, the obvious kind of signs of you're trying to do something else. At the same time, I understand from both sides of it.
I think it's one of the things that they probably don't teach you in art school as far as how to approach a gallery. Maybe they do these days, but if you show up with your phone and you want to you want to scroll through your Instagram feed to show the director what you've been working on, probably not a great idea, right?
Probably not a great idea. Yeah. I get it. It's, I think the gallery world, certainly before I got into it, had this it's almost like this mystique, or taboo. People don't even know whether or not they're welcome in a gallery. And in New York, maybe you're not even welcome in a gallery. But I think part of it is you have to kind of push those boundaries yourself just to understand what not to do. And so I get it. I mean, I think hopefully people can kind of, learn from their mistakes and put it behind them. But I think approaching a gallery is a tough one. And I think going through a co-op first and just kind of understanding how galleries work is a really good way to cut your teeth.
I want you to talk about gallery etiquette. I'm sure you've seen some crazy stuff over the years doing this for 20 years. So is there anything that people should adhere to or think about when they go visit a gallery to look at artwork?
Yeah, I think it's important to just respect the work that goes into creating an exhibit. And so touching the artwork is probably a big no-no. Even taking photographs of the artwork in our current kind of photo obsessed world, it's always nice to ask, if you're allowed to. And I think keeping your noise down, like people come in and they'll have a phone call and they'll be in a meeting for 30 minutes in our gallery, and we're not their office, so that can be a little frustrating. So those are things that are probably not good to do. And I think the best thing to do is, if you're ever not sure about something, is just to ask. It's pretty straightforward.
Yeah, there's no dumb questions, right? Like
right.
And I think the picture thing is a big thing, right? The photo thing these days, people, they want to go snap pictures of where they're at and what they're seeing.
Well, and I think a lot of, even museums have kind of eased their policies on those things. I mean, you see people walking through museums taking photographs, and is that going to be more accepted as the kind of age of the image is everywhere? It seems to be like, I remember, walking through some museums in Paris, and you weren't allowed to break out your phone, never mind try and take a photograph. But now it seems like some of those restrictions, I think, have been eased even in museums. You see people walking around taking photographs. So I think it's becoming the new normal.
Yeah.
One of my things is patience, because I just went and, I didn't just go, but I saw the Mexican modernism exhibit at the Denver Art Museum, and people are in a hurry, and I don't want to be in a hurry when I look at art. I want to stand in front of a piece of art and just take it in. And it was interesting because I did a day out with a buddy of mine to go see art, and we were at a gallery, and actually they had taken the time to put a dot in front of each one. And the director said, the artist wants you to spend at least 30 seconds looking at the piece.
Interesting.
Yeah. Before you move on or whatever. And there was nobody else in the gallery. And this is something I do all the time anyway. Like, I want to sit there and kind of take it in, because I don't think you can just, do a drive-by and get a sense of what's going on. You got to really have to, stand in front of the work and contemplate it for a little bit. I did that with Tycho's work when I came and saw the exhibit that you have currently at the gallery. I went through there probably 3 different times looking at different pieces.
There's a lot to see, and it's pretty easy to overlook things, when you're caught up in kind of a time crunch. So I think that's a great, a great point. I think it's worth really committing yourself to kind of not to be interrupted, turn your phone off, just completely get into the zone. And what I like to do in gallery exhibits is look at the work first, and then maybe if there's a statement or a bio, come back to that, and just, instead of reading that first and having that kind of inform the work, I think it's better to kind of absorb the work first, make your own interpretation, and then see what the artist had to say about it.
I love that. I think that's right on. I do that so often where I don't read the artist statement. I go look at the work and then I'll come back to it. So,
yeah.
So somebody that's not really into, or maybe just beginning to really experience abstract art, what is some elements that you can suggest for the viewer to look for or to experience in the art?
One thing that I really like to see is just, a sense of history in the work. Like, often like to see maybe where something was painted over and edited. I really enjoy where artists leave part of that discovery exposed, so that you can kind of see some of the struggles that the artist went through. Even if it gets to be fairly polished as a work, I think some of those mistakes and some of those changes are better left in there, as something that you can point to as markers, as kind of a triumph or a failure. What I love about abstract work is often kind of the contrast between things that are really thickly painted and areas that are left, almost untouched, really fine marks versus really crude ones. All these contrasts, I think, in my mind, are really fun things for good abstract work to be successful. I think a lot of those contrasts, make it more interesting. You might have a huge area of the canvas that totally intense, but then there's an area that's very quiet, as a respite. I think those are things that I look for, are little markers that kind of show the artist's history with the work, but also things that little surprises that maybe weren't intentional, but that were really successful. So it's hard to put your finger on. Mm-hmm. And there's so much abstract work out there, that, it's also kind of, for someone who's somewhat new to it, it might seem totally overwhelming. But what I would say is just be true to your initial reaction. And if you like it, try and break it down and understand why you like it, and look for the things that really are working. Maybe it's just a combination of these two colors together that are vibrating, or, the fact that, all down the left side, it's all, black and white, and then it's all color over here. There's just little things that I think over time you come to appreciate things that you enjoy in a work. And I think those are the things that make it fun. But I think you can also, as you come to understand, and probably I'm in a unique position where I see artists every year create new bodies of work, but where they're pushing themselves to, like, maybe an uncomfortable situation, but it becomes a real breakthrough. And I think for a lot of artists, it's pushing beyond that comfort zone, which is the hardest thing to do, because you get into this rhythm of painting, and you get comfortable painting a certain thing and it works, then why change it? And I think the hardest thing is to break beyond that, to get to something that is much more challenging, but ultimately a lot more rewarding. So that's the magic of abstraction. I think it's constantly pushing yourself to be uncomfortable, to get to the next level, which I think a lot of people have a hard time doing, understandably, because you're literally going against your own instinct. But I think that's what makes the best abstract painting. So it's a tough one.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that, because I think a lot of times I'm even known to really struggle with abstract painting. And so it's nice to hear like what to kind of look for. So I love that, the idea of contrast. I think that's cool.
Yeah. And that's just, for me, what kind of gets me excited about work is showing these, those things that highlight those contrasts. I think probably it becomes more visually stimulating because you're seeing these highs and lows, and I think those are things that I look for, but everyone's different.
Yeah.
What would you say your role is and responsibility is as a gallery owner to both the artist and the collector?
I think for the artists, It's to promote their work and ultimately try and sell it. The artists have put a huge amount of time and effort into creating a new body of work. So in my mind, when the work comes to us, they've done their part in terms of creating the work. Our job is just beginning in terms of, like promoting the work, marketing it, and exhibiting it. And ultimately, if the artist has really put all of their effort in, then we have to reciprocate and do as much work as they did in terms of trying to find a new home for it. And there's nothing more rewarding for an artist to know that their piece has found, someone else who appreciates it as much as the artist did. So it's the ultimate end goal. But, I think in Colorado, I don't think a lot of people grew up surrounded by artwork like I did. And so I see a lot of new collectors who, have all these questions, who don't know what they're getting into and need, some guidance in terms of pricing and starting a collection, and who's to say that it should have this value. We've had several people recently who have bought things that, want a certificate of authenticity or a bill of sale. And that's something I think that most galleries should provide with their works anyway. I think for the relationship to work well, there has to be a lot of trust that, when the work gets to the gallery, for us, we're not just putting it up on the wall and hoping it sells. We're actively reaching out to people. We're taking it out to clients' homes. We're taking it to presentations for commercial sales, and we're trying our every effort to move the work and place it, because that's ultimately what the relationship is about. The trust that the artist is going to make great work and has put all their effort into creating it, and the trust on them or for us to do our best effort to try and sell it. So I think that's when it starts working, I think.
Do you work with the artists as far as pricing their work, or do you let them set that?
Yeah, I do. I help them out. Some artists, have it all figured out and have created enough of a kind of market that I think it makes sense. They know what they want to mark their work at. But I mean, that's a question every single exhibit. What should we mark this at? What should we price this at? What's the going rate for this? And so I think pricing is a tough thing to establish. I think it's really hard to come down. So it's better to build yourself up slowly and like Tycho, when she first started exhibiting work with us, her prints were maybe $500, and now, in this current exhibit we sold 5 and they're $27.50. But it took her 6 years to build up the price to get to that level. Each time there may be 15% increase, something like that. But her work has progressively gotten better and better, and she's put more and more time into it. So naturally, it I think it makes sense that the price kind of starts to build as her career and her dedication go up too. So I think there's a lot of factors that go into pricing, and it's not just kind of a slam dunk on how many hours did you put into this, or I think there's so many different things that we think about when we're pricing a work. Whether that artist is being collected by a museum, how well they sold the year before, are they in other markets in the U.S. Typically, we like to keep all the pricing the same throughout. If artists have galleries in 6 states, you don't want one gallery selling a work that's half the price, but the same size of another one. So keeping the market, stable throughout is really important too.
So there's a lot of communication that's going on behind the scenes to make all this go.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think the artist and I communicate a lot, and what I love to do is go do studio visits, regardless of whether or not that artist is showing. I think it's really good just to see what they're doing, where their head's at, how motivated they are, factors that are going on in their life that might be preventing them from creating work. I mean, all these things that kind of go into just the human being too. Like, these people are not just out there creating, they've got their own lives too. And so I think it's important to understand their kind of psychology too, and understand them at a basic human level is important too, because we're all human beings, and sometimes we just need a little compassion. So I think there's a ton that goes into it, and some artists are really hard to work with, but often it's because they've had a really rough go of it in some other environment, or some other factor is playing into that. And so you have to kind of, for me, I have to get to the bottom of that to understand where I'm at with this person and why it's difficult. And if I can't work with that person, then it's not going to be a good relationship. There's no point in continuing it. But if we can understand why and we can get to the other side, then I think that's also part of the job, is to get inside those artists' head a little bit and just make sure that, we're on the same level. So I think there's a ton that goes into it.
Can you talk about, as a gallery owner, you have a ton of overhead, and not only, it's not like you're just taking in this work and hang it on the walls and then having a show for these artists. There's the promotion behind the scenes and working with collectors, and there's a lot to it. I imagine you have some employees, but there's a commission or a split that you guys work off of as far as how this all works.
Most galleries, commercial galleries, are 50% commission. Some in New York might be 60-40, favoring the gallery just because their overhead is so astronomical. But 50-50 is pretty common. And then there's also a pretty common split with art consultants or designers or architects when they kind of factor into the sale too. So a lot of those things are sort of industry standard. But there's always different factors that play into that.
My last question for you, Michael, and I'll let you go. Do you spend a lot of times going to these art fairs?
No, I have not been to many art fairs, and I think part of it is just my free time is just totally consumed with my family for the most part, and enjoying their company. So part of it is just not having the bandwidth for it. I think actually those shows is a whole science unto itself, and I never really got into it. I think partly because the fees are so high, and you have to understand your market to get into those fairs in the first place. If you're going to spend $20,000 for a booth, you want to know that coming out of that, you can at least make your money back and make some really good connections. And I think for me, it was hard to really have the confidence that was something that we could pull off. I feel like every year I get closer to doing it because we're building collectors all the time, and they're all over the country. And so, it's taken me a long time to get here, but now I feel like in any city, we probably have 5 or 6 people that we could invite, and it would be worth doing. And of course, you're going to meet new collectors. But again, that expense is just something that I could never pull off.
That's a lot of money to shoulder up front.
It is. And, I got 4 kids to send to college. And so I just felt like that's more of a priority.
Absolutely, man.
Most definitely.
I had no idea that the cost that was involved. I was just curious, that I had seen that, galleries go to these art fairs nationally or internationally or what have you. I was curious if you'd done it, but yeah, I'm with you. Like that would be a hard pill to swallow. It's a lot of cash up front, like you said, unless you know for a fact that you're going to at least break even. It's a big gamble.
There's a lot of people that do it very successfully. I think David B. Smith is a gallery that I really respect in Denver, and he is, he's a big proponent of doing the art fairs, and it's really been successful for him because he kind of really understands his market. And I think he's ahead of me in terms of just being able to market to the right people before he goes out and does these things. And he's got the savvy to kind of make sense of it. So, I'm impressed when people can make it work. Oftentimes I think, for them, it's more lucrative than just staying home. But we have a really good, strong base of local collectors, and I've honestly never felt, the need to kind of go out to another city and try and find them. We've got lots of people that come to Colorado to visit, so it's like pulling those people in when they are visiting, I think is as powerful for me. But every gallery is different.
Hey man, I really appreciate you taking time with us this evening. And
my pleasure. Sorry, I was a little disconnected, but hopefully we got somewhere. And I appreciate you guys doing what you do, because this is probably all just because you're passionate about it, and so bringing a new perspective to people that are listening is all important, and making them understand a little more about the business is awesome. So I appreciate what you do. Thanks for having me.
Well, thank you.
We'll have you on again sometime. We'll talk about one of your upcoming shows. We'll have you on again and we'll talk some more art. How's that sound?
That sounds awesome. Thanks so much, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Todd, Wes, take care.
For the Tenant Podcast, I'm Todd Pearson.
And I'm Wes Brown.
Have a great week.